Hi guys, you're welcome back to my channel. All right, so if you're just seeing me for the first time, you're welcome. My name is Stella. Okay, so let's jump right into what we have. Now, in my previous video, we drafted a basic bodice block and then we went ahead to alter it to a corset pattern. Okay, and we also drafted a skirt pattern. Okay, all right, so I went ahead to transfer all that to fabric. Okay, and I ironed my interfacing, and in this case I made use of a hairstay. Okay, now let's proceed. I'll take us through all the patterns. Now that's the side pieces. Okay, and then the center front as well. Okay, so and as usual I went ahead to mark 0 0.5. That's our stitch lines. You guys know I like to mark out my stitch lines. Okay, so I have all that marked out. Now we'll proceed to the joining. Okay, I know you'll be wondering how I know especially the center back. Now I like to give notches to indicate which is which. Okay, if not, the moment you take off the pins and separate the patterns, you become a bit confused. Now let's proceed with the joining of the cups. Okay, now these are the cups. Okay, so I went ahead to mark 0 0.5 inch around it. Okay, which will be our stitch lines. Now we'll proceed with the joining. So I'll pick up the center front piece and the side front piece. You remember our patterns. Okay, now to know which side is the center front, I went ahead to give that double notches. Okay, so once I see that, I know that that's the side facing the center front. Okay, so I'll pick up one of the side front and one of the center front piece. Okay, and I'll go ahead and join it along the bust point line. Okay, using the 0 0.5 inch mark that I have there. Now I'll also pick up the center front piece. Okay, and the side pieces of the front. Now as you can see, I have the 0 0.5 stitch lines clearly marked. Okay, so I'll go ahead and join the front pieces together and I'll give it a good press. Now the same thing applies to the back pieces as well. Okay, now for the back pieces, I went ahead to give it a notch on the chest line. Okay, if not, because if you take a good look at the pattern, the lower part, which is the hem line, okay, and the chest line, they look a bit the same. So I use my notches to indicate the chest line. Now I'll go ahead and use my 0 0.5 to join the pieces together and I'll give it a good press. Okay, now I'll come back and show us. Okay, so moving on, here's our skirt pattern. Okay, so you remember I told us that I'm going to be holding the back dart. Okay, only now I'm going to be making use of the satin as both the lining and the main fabric. Okay, so the back pattern, I have four pieces. Okay, same thing applies to the front as well. Now remember that for the front pattern is on fold. Okay, I needed to point that out. Now I like to give a notch on my hip line. Okay, I also did that on the back pattern as well, and then I also notched the 1 inch zip allowance. Now this will be useful to you when it's time for us to do the final shaping. Okay, now I'll take this to the same machine and I'll first hold the back dart. Okay, now I'll use a loose stitch from the waist of the center back, okay, downwards. Now I want this skirt to have a tiny slit, so my slit length is 4 inches. Okay, so um I'll use a loose stitch, okay, from the waist to the hip, and from the hip I'll return my setting to the normal tight stitch to that 4 inches where the slit will start from, and then from there I'll use a loose stitch to the hem as well. Then I'll give it a good press. Okay, so I have joined my pieces together. Okay, so these are the cups. I've joined it. Now I'll still go ahead and trim down the allowance to 0.25, or you can leave it, it's all optional. Okay, so this is my center, my front piece. Okay, now I went ahead to mark my 0.5 that I'll be using to fix the cup when it's time. Okay, so these are my back pieces as well. Okay, joined and pressed. I also marked out my allowances, okay, which is 0.5. Now remember I told us that I'll be making use of the satin as both the main fabric and the lining. Okay, so here we have it. I will decide which one will be my lining and which one will be the main fabric because they are both the same. Okay, so here they are. Now we'll move on to encase. Okay, so we'll be encasing our regilin bone on the front and the back piece as well. So this is the bone that we'll be working with. Okay, but I'll go ahead and cut out my fabric. Okay, now the width of the fabric will be 2 inches. Now I'll cut this and I'll show us how to encase. Although I have a video on my channel on how to encase, but I'll still take us through the process again. Okay. But first, I like to iron down my bone. Okay. I think is um better to iron before you use, or you can do the other way around, whichever works for you. Okay. Now moving on to the skirt. So this is my skirt pattern. You can see I've held my 1 inch um sewing allowance down. Okay, so I held my dart as well, and then I pressed it open. Okay, now this is the lining piece, okay, of the back as well. I did the same thing. Okay, now I have done my shaping. Okay, but I have a video as well on how to do a shaping, but I'll still take us through the shaping process as well. Okay, so the first thing first, we're going to join the skirt. That's the main fabric first, and then we'll go ahead and join the lining. Now, how I do my shaping, I'll go ahead and measure out the waistline of the front, hip line of the front, and the knee line or the hemline of the front. I'll repeat the same on the back as well. Now I'll go ahead and add the waist measurement I got on the front to the waist measurement I got on the back. Okay, and I will subtract that from her actual waist. Now, her actual waist round is 35. So let's assume that I got 40. Okay. Now, then I subtract her actual waist round, which is 35. 35 that you take out from 40, you're left with 5. Now, that 5 inches, I'll go ahead and divide it into 4. Okay. Whatever I get, I'll mark that on the side. So that's how I do my shaping. Okay. So I'll go ahead and join my skirt and join the lining as well. Now, if you take a good look at the style, you will see um that it has organza. Okay, so now the dress length that we're working with is 58 inches. Okay, now from her shoulder to her waist it's 18 inches. So if you take that out from the total length of 58, we're left with 40 inches. Now I simply added just 1 inch allowance, okay, for overlocking. All right, so we'll keep this aside and join our skirts. Okay, so before we fix the cups, we need to first encase. Okay, so I went ahead to mark the our encasing lines. Okay, so I simply divided here into two and I marked the midpoint, got the midpoint of here as well and connected. So that's the first line. Then um second line, from this joining here, I came up here by 1 inch. Okay, and from here is 1.5. So from here to here is 1.5, and I connected it to the 1 inch mark here. Okay, I did the same thing here. From this midpoint to here is 1.5, connected it to the 1 inch that we have here. Okay, and from here, from this joining here, I measured 3.5 inches, and I have 2 inches up here. Okay, so 3.5 to 2 inches. Okay, and then there's a line here. Now I repeated the same thing as well here, 3.5 inches and 2 inches. Okay, so these are my boning lines. All right, so I went ahead to cut out. Now it's simple for the midpoint. So I will measure. Now from here down is 15 inches. So we need to come down here by half inch, or you can come down by 1, so that we can turn here easily, okay, without the bone entering. So I went ahead to subtract 0.75, okay, or 1 inch if you want to, but I subtracted 0.75, and I cut out my bone. So the bone will extend down to this full length. Okay, now this is how it's going to be. So this is where the bone is going to start. Can you see? So I have all this gap here for turning, okay, so that that place will relax well. Now that's how I'll go ahead and measure out. I'll measure all these boning lines and I'll subtract 0.75 from all of them. Okay, I'll cut out um the boning lines as well. As you can see, I have pressed it, so it's now straight. Now I also went ahead to cut out my um the fabric that we'll use for the encasing. The width of this is measuring 2 inches. Okay, so I'll go ahead and wrap it. I'll leave the link in the description box on how I do my encasing. So but let me just run it through. So I'll place the bone on the right side. Remember, we're coming down by this same 0.75 here. I also come down here by 0.75. So I'll place the bone on this is the right side of the satin. I'll go ahead and stitch very close to this, leaving about 0.25 space here. So after I stitch, I'll go ahead and flip it like this, use the satin to wrap it round, okay? And I'll stitch it. So I'll leave the link in the description box where I did a detailed video on how to encase a regime bone. So I'll go ahead and encase all these lines, okay? Now for the back, I'm only going to encase on our joinings, okay? So I will not draw extra line. So I'll just go ahead and encase on these lines, okay? Like so. I have also, I came down by 0.75 as well. So I'll repeat the same on this side. Wrap it, encase it with this bridal satin, and I'll stitch it down on it. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do this, join the bra cups, and one key thing, okay, so that we don't make the video excessively long. Now for the back, we're going to be attaching our loops. So to attach your loop, the first thing you need to do is to come down here by half inch, because we're going to use half inch here to turn this up part, okay? So if you first come down here by half inch, then I went ahead to mark 1 inch all through. I also came up here by half inch, okay? So I'm going to be attaching my loops, okay? So I'll place it here and the next one to this point, okay, like that. I'm going to attach my loops all around, repeat the same on the other side back, okay? And I'll show us. So I have joined the skirt, so it's just a basic skirt. So I've joined it, and I went ahead to press, but our slit, remember our 4 inches slit is still open, and we're here to fix our zip, okay? So I just used pins to, so I just used pins to hold the waist down, okay, temporal. All right, so this is the skirt. Now we'll go ahead now and add the organza. Now at this stage you may want to go ahead and overlock the rough edges of the skirt, okay? So but we'll proceed, okay? So I went ahead to join the skirt. This is just a basic skirt, okay, nothing special. Now this is the slit, our 4 inches slit, okay? So remember I told us that we're going to be making use of the satin also, okay, as the lining. So if you look, you will see that both the, now this is the inside of the lining, okay? How you will know is from here, okay? So we'll turn the skirt now to the right side, okay? And if you see, I have not fixed the zip as well. Okay, so we'll proceed. Now remember I told us that the organza is 6 inches. Remember I told us that the organza is 6 yards. Now I went further to reduce it to 4 yards, okay? Because my client does not want it extremely full. So what we have here now is 4 yards of organza. You can see how small it is, okay? And the length is still 40 inches. Now we'll go ahead now and indicate the midpoint, okay, which I have done. So I simply folded it into two and I notched the center, okay? Now I'll go ahead and align the center of this, okay? So I'll align the midpoint of the organza to the midpoint of the skirt. Okay, so I found the midpoint because I had earlier notched it. Okay, so I'll go ahead and now we're going to be pleating this just on the main skirt and not on the lining, okay? So I'm going to flip in the lining of the skirt, okay? Remember, we're going to pleat this only on the main skirt, okay? So I'll go ahead and pin this down on, I'll go ahead and align the midpoint, middle of the organza to the middle of the skirt, okay? Then I will proceed to the machine, and now the whole essence of this division is to ensure that we have equal organza spread around the skirt so that one side will not be more clustered than the other. Okay, so I'll go ahead now, and now that we've divided, so I also went further to divide it further. Okay, so I'm going to pin this midpoint to this side joining. Okay, like so. Now now the end of the organza to the 1 inch zip allowance. Okay, so can you see the way I have divided? Okay, so can you see the way I have divided the organza? Now I'll pleat this quantity here. Okay, from the zip allowance to the side joining, then I'll pleat this quantity here from the side joining to the center front. I'll repeat the same process on the other side. Remember, we are pleating only on the main skirt, okay, on the main fabric and not on the lining. I flipped the lining inside. Okay, so I'll go ahead and pleat this. Now when I'm done, I will fix the zip. Okay, so I'll fix the zip all still on the main fabric, not on the lining. Okay, now I'll do this and I will show us. Okay, all right, so I'm done. Okay, so I've pleated the organza around the waist of the skirt. I also went ahead to fix the zip. Okay, and I have closed the organza. Now another important part when closing the organza, if you notice the organza, now if you notice I closed the organza separate from the skirt. Remember, we had earlier closed the skirt. Now this will make it to relax well. Okay, so and now we'll go ahead now to use the lining. So it's time for us to bring in the lining. Okay, so we'll use the lining now to turn the skirt. Okay, so it's time for us to turn the lining, to turn the skirt with the lining. Now from the zip, I'll use my tape and come in by 1.25. Okay, so I'll make a notch there. Now I'll repeat the same on the other side of the zip as well. Okay, now I'll flip the lining, then use it to turn from that 1.25 notch. Okay, then downwards to the zip. I'll repeat the same on the other side as well. Okay, and that will be it. Then I'll go ahead and just stop stitch the rest of the waist. Okay, I'll stitch round it. Okay, and that will be it for the skirt. Okay, and then we'll proceed. Okay, so the top part of the dress is ready. Now I first went ahead to encase like I explained for us. Okay, then I fixed the cups. Also, I top stitched the cup. Okay, now this is the wrong side. Okay, now I also came down by ½ inch from the chest line to fix the loops. I did the same on the hem as well. I came up by ½ inch. Okay, now this is the lining. I fixed the cup as well, and I top stitched the cups. Now this will help it to relax better. Okay, now I noticed when I was joining this lining, I noticed that the satin stretches a lot. Okay, remember that what I have there is a single layer of interfacing. Now if you don't want yours to stretch at all, I will suggest you iron down maybe 2 layers, okay, of the hairstay, but mine is a single layer, so it stretches a lot. Okay, so I just needed us to take note of that. Okay, so and here is the net that we'll be working with. This is 2 years of net. Okay, so I went ahead to fold it into two. Okay, then I just joined it. Now you can use less than that, but what I have here is 2 inches, so I folded it into two, stitched in the middle. Okay, then gave it just a tiny press. Remember that this is a net. Okay, so it's a light fabric. Then I turned it to the right side. Now I will come in with the same net. Now that midpoint where we joined, I'm going to place it at the midpoint of of our outfit. Okay, So I'll go ahead and pin it down, ensuring that the midpoint of the net is at the midpoint of our upper bodice as well. Okay, then I'll pin. Now I'll take this to the sewing machine and I'll gather it. Okay, you can either gather or you pleat, but just ensure that you distribute it equally, okay, on each of the cups. All right, so I'll do this, then I'll come back and show us. Okay, all right, guys. So I'm done gathering the net, okay, on the cups. All right, so the next thing is for me to place it on the mannequin so we can drape the net on the shoulder. All right, so here it is. I have the net um on the mannequin now, okay. So now the first thing to do is to flip it to the back, okay. Now the rule of thumb for draping, especially on the shoulder, is to ensure that it's not tight. In fact, it's advisable the client comes in, okay, so that you drape it directly on their body to their comfort level, okay. But since she's not around, okay, so we're going to be working with the mannequin, okay. Now I'll go ahead and start pleating, just tiny pleats, okay, at the back. So I'm pleating it on the chest line of the back, okay. So I'll go ahead and give it a little pleat and I will pin it down, okay. Now while doing this, ensure that it's not tight, okay. You remember that it's going to pass through the shoulder and you don't want the person to be uncomfortable, okay, while wearing the dress. So you need to ensure that it's not tight on the shoulder, okay. So I'll just go ahead and continue with the pleats. Now towards the end of the shoulder. Now, okay, so towards the end of the shoulder, you need to allow some of the net to drop on the sleeve, okay? So to form just a little cap sleeve effect, okay? So all the net should not be on top of the shoulder. You need to allow some of the net, just a little of it, to drop on the shoulder, okay? So that it gives you that cap sleeve effect. All right, so I just needed to point that out for us. So I'll just continue with the pinning, okay? And when I'm done, I will ensure that there's still a little bit of freedom, okay, around the shoulder and the neck area, because these are the areas that the net will pass through to the back, okay. So that's it. I'm actually done. Now I'll come in with my scissors and I will cut, but I'll still leave an allowance of 1 inch, okay. Remember that we're still going to turn this with the lining, okay. So I'll leave allowance of 1 inch before I cut the net, okay, since I'm done with the pins. So I'll come in with my scissors now and we'll cut. Okay, so I'll go ahead now and cut. Now, remember what I said, we're not cutting exact, we're still leaving a little bit of allowance for turning with the lining, okay? So here it is, I've cut. Now, I'll go ahead and take off the pins and take this top off the mannequin. Then I'll take it to my sewing machine and turn with the lining. All right, so here it is, I'm done. I've turned it with the lining, okay? And I give it a good press. You can see how this is relaxing. All right, so the lower part, now I went ahead to top stitch it, okay. Then I'll go ahead to cut out a long strip of fabric, okay. It's 2 inches wide, so I'll use it to fold that hem line, okay. So I'll do that, give it a good press, and then I'll show us. Okay, all right, guys, so I'm done, okay. So I've taped the hem. All right, so you can see how smooth this is looking. Now let's move over to the shaping of the top part, okay. Now remember that her waist is 35 and we subtracted 3 inches, okay, from our total measurement, so we're left with 32, okay. And what I have there is 32 as well. So her under bust is the same thing, 35 as well, and we subtracted 3 inches, so we're left with 32. Now the next thing we need to do is to come in with the skirt. Okay, but before we do that, we need to mark the lines where the skirt will be stitched on. Now we'll place our tape on her underbust. Remember, her underbust length is 14. So from there we'll mark to her waist length. Okay, remember that her front length is 18 inches. So I'll make a mark there. I'll place the tape also on the other cup. Okay, place it on the underbust length of 14. Make a mark on the 18 inches front length. Then I'll just extend that line to the back. Okay, now if you're not sure that the line is straight, just go ahead and measure from the line extension to the hem. Okay, and what I have there is 5 inches. Now I'll transfer that to the other side of the back. Now this is a guide for you to know that for you to ensure that the line runs straight to the back. Okay, so I'll just extend the half length of the front to that 5 inches that we just measured at the back now. Okay, and here we have it. Now if you want your dress to have a basque, at this point it's simple. Just come down by whatever you want. Let's say you want a basque of 2 inches or 3. You just measure it from the midpoint. Okay, and you connect it from the side joinings, okay, to meet that midpoint, and that's it. But that's the style. That's not the style that we're working with. So from the style in the picture, um the waistline is straight. Okay, it's not having any form of basque. So I'll fold the skirt into two and I'll notch the midpoint of the skirt. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to do. Fold your skirt into two and notch the midpoint. Now I will also indicate the midpoint of the top part. Okay, which is the bone that we have there in the middle. Now I'll open up the skirt and align the midpoint of the skirt to the midpoint of the top. Okay, and I'll pin it down like so. Okay, now it's time for us to pin along the marked line that we have. Okay, so I'll go ahead with my pin now and I'll pin along that line, okay, to the back. Now you need to stretch out properly, okay, so that when your client wears it, it will rest well on their body. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stretch this out and pin along that line to the back. Okay, now I'll repeat the same thing on the other side of the back as well. Okay, now we're going to stitch on 0.5. Okay, so I'll stitch down the skirt with 0.5, and then when I'm done, I'll give it a very good press, okay, so that it will relax well, and then that will be it. All right, guys, so this is the dress. Okay, so we are done. Now, if you take a good look at the dress, especially the waist part, you can see how relaxed the organza is. Okay, so that's the beauty of ironing every step of the way. Okay, so this is the inside of the dress. You can see how the corset is sitting very well. Now remember that we only use the regilin bone. Okay, so just imagine if we had added the plastic bone as well. Okay, it's going to be super snatched, but this is still great. Okay, and so we're actually done. Now I went ahead to prepare the structure sleeve. Okay, so I'll still upload the video, a detailed video on how to draft, cut and sew a structure sleeve. I didn't want to add it to this because it's going to make it unnecessarily too long, so it's going to be a separate video. Okay, so I'll go ahead and tack this on this side of the sleeve as well. Okay, so I'll repeat the same on the other side of that same sleeve. Okay, so I'll use my needle and thread to tack. All right, so I'll do this, then I will wear the dress on the mannequin. Okay, so here it is. The video is not even doing justice to this. Okay, so the dress is lovely, the color choice is great. Okay, all right, thank you guys for watching. I know I took so long to upload this video. Okay, but bear with me. All right, so I will see you in my next video. Bye.